I'm sorry, my name is Mark Bach. I'm a property manager for Team 6, so we handle all the infrastructure on the site. Ann had kind of gone over most of the green purchasing items that we wanted to talk about. I will say there is a typo down, let's see where we're at here. Right here under green products should be exists, not exits. So if you want to change that, thank you. Sorry about that. I usually project, so I usually don't need a mic. At least that's what everybody tells me. So basically, what we're looking at is for you guys to be an active part of our green purchasing. So, if there's products that you know of that are better than what we're using now, are more environmentally friendly, then we kind of look to you guys to come to us instead of us having to come to you and say, hey, why don't we think about using this other product? So, and then we'll vet it out. We'll look and see if it's something that's acceptable. If it is, then great, we'll use it. If not, then we'll stay with the product we have. There are waivers that you can get if the product is just not, like I said, a green product does not exist, too expensive, otherwise inappropriate. We can get a waiver that can be signed and approved. So basically, that's pretty much it on green purchasing. Any questions on that? Okay. We'll move to the next one then. And that is recycling and universal waste. And bear with me because I'm also presenting for our regional recycling coordinator who's not here today. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to concentrate on just things that are for you contractors and not for the rest of us internally. That's stuff that we can do. So basically just talking about recycling. Vince, this really kind of applies to you guys when you're on a construction project. We look at what can be recycled, things like concrete. We typically won't store it on site any longer, so it'd be something where you'd have to take it to a recycling plant and have that ground into a road base or whatever, but more about a manifest just to show that it was taken off site and used, or maybe it's something that could be ground and maybe we can reuse it here on our site. But if it's something that we can reuse here, we just as soon do that if we can. So a lot of it's just providing the proper roll-offs for your source separation. Things like wood can be ground and used as mulch on our site. Steel obviously can be commingled and shipped to a metal recycler. Brick, masonry, porcelain can be ground on site, shipped to a recycler. Landscaping debris, this is more for Joppa, can be utilized as mulch. This is stuff that you guys already know about. You O&M contractors, you have to recycle the fluorescent tubes, which include the non-mercury tubes and lamps as well, mercury switches. Aerosol cans, handle as specified by specific state regulations. Oil containers need to be labeled as used oil and recycled. The big thing is just when you know that you have items that have to be recycled, make sure that you keep all your paperwork and make sure that your COR for your contracts get that paperwork so that they know that you're doing what you should be doing. So if we ever get audited, we've got that information. We can go back and we can show that we've done what we're supposed to be doing. Let's see. I think that pretty much covers that. And of course, you've got the copy of this so you can look it over. Any questions on that? Okay. Let's move on to the next, which is facility waste management. And let's see here. Basically, what we want to make sure is that, and this is for the janitorial service, is that, obviously the trash is removed regularly from the work areas. Sure provisions for trash can cleaning. I know our waste disposal contractor's not here, but, for most of that, they regulate their own industry. So in other words, all the solid waste receptacles we have out here, we also have a lot of single stream waste bins that we provide as a courtesy to our customers. VMX, they'll pretty much police their own process. So in other words, if someone drops a refrigerator into a waste bin, which happens, and it hasn't been, the refrigerants haven't been recycled, obviously that's a no-no. they're going to let us know when there's something like that. But and the same thing with the recycle bins. If there's things in those bins that shouldn't be in there, I look to them to come to us and tell us. I do go out periodically and just look for things that shouldn't be there. We're getting a lot better than we used to be. Years ago, it wasn't uncommon to find people would come in on a Saturday knowing that there was less eyes out here, and that's when they would dump the illegal things in our dumpsters. So we don't seem to have those issues anymore. But if it's something that's solid waste that's hazardous, obviously you're going to have to go through a different process with that. We're going to have to vet that through our environmental program group. There may be certain requirements that you have to meet that are state requirements, but most of the time, like for instance with RME, and for anybody who touches soils out here, we have a pretty extensive excavation permit process that they have to go through, and there's all kinds of questions that they're asked and they have to provide answers for that basically talk about all those things. So, any questions on that? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. And that is construction demo waste. And this would apply to Dennis. I guess this would apply to you, and this would probably apply to the O&M contractors in the building as well, since you guys do occasionally have construction projects that you do. I think the biggest thing is what we're trying to do with construction demo is, if it's truly a waste, then we need to figure out how that needs to be disposed of. But another thing we're trying to do, and Dennis knows about this, we're trying to do more reuse of our construction items. So, you know, if we've got carpet squares, let's say we ordered carpet for a job and we had excess left over, well, instead of just letting that sit, maybe we could use that in a small application somewhere else. Door frames, doors, hardware, anything that can be reused again is just a bonus to our customer. That's one less thing they have to spend money on. We can stretch their dollars a little further and maybe give them a little extra, something else that maybe they hadn't planned on. So, and then the other side of it, again, I'll reiterate, everybody knows if something's hazardous or not. If it is, then it takes a whole different form. We've got a different process we need to go through. If it's not, then it can be handled through normal disposal channels. Any questions on that? Okay.
Mark?
Yes.
Would GSA provide us a place to put a metal dumpster?
Yes, in fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because I know Dennis and I have had many conversations. What typically happens is two things. Yes, first of all, to answer your question, yes, we will work with you to provide a spot for it. Even if, we'll try to give you the most convenient location closest to where you're working. Sometimes that doesn't work that way, and we have to provide a location a little further away than you'd like, but we will help you do that. I think one of the biggest challenges we run into, and Dennis can tell you this, is having people throwing items into the dumpster that was designated for your construction project. And you know, the only thing I can tell you is what we've done is just do a simple laminated sign, you know, something simple that you can put behind a piece of plastic. Don't go and spend a lot of money, but just something that says, this dumpster is designated for construction waste. Please do not dump anything else in here. It's really hard to police it. I mean, unless you see somebody physically putting it in the dumpster and you go and have a conversation, there's really no way of finding out. We do have cameras, but it's hit and miss as to whether we're able to really pin somebody down or not. So that's pretty. Any other questions? Okay. Actually, this probably applies mainly for Joppa, our landscape contractor, and I see there's nobody here from Joppa. I've sent messages to them asking them if they were planning on coming and haven't got a response, but I'll go with this anyway. Basically, this is for Joppa because they have insect spraying that they need to do, and there's also herbicides for weeds and things that they need to put down. And I think the biggest thing is, again, look for products that are environmentally sustainable and are not going to affect people any more than we can. I mean, we have people that are very sensitive, that have are sensitive to all kinds of chemicals and things. And what we ask our contractors to do is to give us a schedule of what your spraying or any chemical applications would look like. You know, when do you have to do it? Is it something has to be done in the morning? Does it have to be done in an afternoon? But what we like to do is to try to give our folks in the buildings around where we're going to be spraying a heads up a week before we're going to be doing the spraying, so that they can go, if they know they have people that are hypersensitive in their buildings, they can go and have a conversation with them. They can make arrangements for that individual to mobile work that day, telework. They could take leave that day, but it's just an opportunity to do that. Also, we have buildings that have mass spectrometers, a lot of really sophisticated equipment, and sometimes just a small amount of chemical can be drawn in through an air intake, and just that small amount of chemical that you can't see or smell will affect their experiments that are going on in their building. And sometimes it can have a really dramatic effect. I mean, they could be doing something that they've been working on for 3 months, and all it takes is one incident to ruin that 3 months worth of work. And it's happened, and they're not real happy about it. I wouldn't be if I've just spent 3 months working on something and have it destroyed in one afternoon. So the biggest thing is just have conversations. You know, I tell everybody this: if it doesn't feel right in any way, then there's probably a reason why you feel that way. And that little person inside of you is telling you, you probably need to have a conversation with someone. And I tell everybody, there's no such thing as a stupid question. The only stupid question is the one that's not asked, because they usually come back and bite you if you don't ask the question. So ask the questions up front. We're all in this together. We're going to help you try to solve any issues we have the best we can. Any questions about that? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to skip around a little bit, because the last two procedures I have are really aimed at JAPA maintenance, our landscape contractor, more than anything else. So what I'm going to go over is what applies to everybody inside and outside the buildings for the O&M, and that's our cross-connection and backflow incidents. So this applies to equipment within the building, i.e. boilers, cooling towers, incoming potable water supplies, etc., and then also testable line devices outside on all the backflow preventers. Basically, the state of Colorado requires that a licensed journeyman plumber with the state of Colorado install all backflow devices. You have to be a certified tester with the state of Colorado. They put you through a written and practical test. I've been through the test and taken it. It's a written test, and then they don't tell you what device they're going to give you, and then they hand you a differential gauge, and then you have to test the device. The biggest thing is that you know, and I'm sure you're already aware of this, that the state requires that all testable devices be tested every year. You have to make sure that those records get to your COR. Of course, once you put the differential gauge on, the whole process there is it's going to tell you whether your springs and your check valves are at the right tension. If they're not, that'll come up on the differential gauge. It'll tell you that. It'll also tell you if a check has failed, and usually the reason for that is there's a piece of debris on the check, the face of the check valve. And so what it could require is for you to, if it's failed, you have to determine what part of that device has failed, and then you have to repair that. And you have to list that on your form, saying that this is what happened during the initial test, this is what we determined failed during that test, this is what we replaced, we retested it, and it passed. Remember that your differential gauges have to be calibrated occasionally. They do tend, you can drop them, things like that. They can fall out of calibration, so I always remind people to do that. The big thing during a backflow incident is that property management is notified, the contractors, O&M, whoever it happens to be, landscaping. And then, of course, we have to notify all the right people, our industrial hygienist, our EPG group. Typically, we also have to get the local health department involved, depending on how severe it is. Obviously, we need to find out what caused it. It could be a device that failed. It's on a system where you have chemicals in a boiler. I mean, that's what it's there to protect. Basically, that's it. It's just it can be a long, drawn-out process. We've been real lucky out here. In the 25 years I've been here, we haven't had an incident to this point. And I think that's a testament to the fact that we do take this very seriously and we do keep an eye on all this. So if you have specific questions about any backflow devices or whatever, feel free to contact either myself or your COR for your contracts. Any questions? Okay. The last two I have really only apply to JAPA maintenance. So I'm just going to make a general statement just to let you guys know that next Tuesday through Thursday, our SEMS program that we're going over right now will be audited. So we'll have an auditor on site. So what I would suggest to all of you is we've created a bit of a cheat sheet because we realize that this is really the first real go at this, and we don't expect everybody to have all the answers. But what I would suggest to you is have a conversation with your building manager, your property manager, your CORs for your contracts, and have this discussion as soon as you can before next Tuesday. Because this is what will happen. Depending on who's on site, they could go to the supervisor of your group and ask you specific questions about the program. And again, we'll give you that cheat sheet and we'll work with you to try to develop answers. The other side of it is, well, we just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, but they could come to a laborer. Okay, a laborer's not going to be expected to know everything there is to know about this program, but he needs to know the basics. What happens if you're out applying an herbicide or a pesticide or whatever it happens to be and you spill it? What do you do? If you see a chemical spill into a gutter and it's heading towards a storm drain, what do you do? So even the lowest folks, the people that really are the ones that are in the face of the customer doing their work, they may still need to know the basics. So if you're not sure about what those responses need to be, then talk to somebody ahead of time, because this is not going to be a gotcha exercise. This is more just, they just want to find out how prepared are we and do we really know. For instance, they may just ask you something simple like, do you know where to get this SEMS information? That would be the ra@sems.com, the website that was given to you earlier. Talk about, with your COR, your property managers, talk about GSA's environmental program. They may ask if you know what it is, and more importantly, they just want to know that you know where to find it. So that's the kind of conversations that you guys need to have with all your property management and COR. So if there's any questions, just follow that route, but I do want to let everybody know that that audit is coming next week. So, and depending on time constraints and all and availability, some of you may get more extensively talked to than others. It just depends on who's here, okay? So with that said, I think the only person left that I need to really talk to is Tim. If the rest of you want to stay for the last two, you're welcome to. So basically then, Tim, this is kind of something that we had gone over earlier, and this is all stuff that you know, I'm not going to go over every single item because these are things that you guys already know about. You know that there's restrictions by the state, how much of a chemical you can store in a building. There's requirements about how it needs to be contained. There also needs to be a certain amount of training in exposure to hazardous materials. The guys need to know, like if the auditor walks in and says, hey, let's say somebody accidentally spills this over and spills on the floor, what do you do? So again, I think the big thing, Tim, is that I scheduled a meeting with Bob Melvin, myself, Michael Galinda, and Bruce Johnson, because those are the two CORs for all of our contracts on our team. And what I'm thinking about is maybe including you and Vince at the same meeting, or we'll vet things out and then we'll talk to you guys, because we gave answers, but answers need to be a little more specific to your group on this cheat sheet. And again, Vince, if you're not here Tuesday through Thursday, you may not get this. Tim, unfortunately, because you have such a large area you're in, I can almost guarantee you unequivocally you will be asked. The auditor will come to your area and will ask you questions. So, you know, the big thing is that the guys in the area, if he just randomly chooses a guy that could end up being a laborer, but he needs to know the basic stuff about what he's doing. So That basically covers that. And then, of course, the next one is the grounds maintenance water use. And I think the big thing there, Tim, I mean, we've gone all this stuff so many times, is that, you know, excuse me, as well as I do, that we have to be careful how much water we use, and a lot of times it's perception. Like I know we've had some instances with excessive water pressure where we've had some valves stick and things, and it's just that when people see watering going on for 2 days, or we're watering during a rain event, those are things that set off, you know, we know those set off red flags for everybody. We're going to be putting in this new system. Hopefully that will help with our water use. The fact that we've now metered all of our buildings, we can now hopefully develop a good baseline that says, okay, this is all the water we're using in our buildings. So if you deduct that from the overall gallons that we get from on our bill from Denver Water, then logically what's left over has got to be from landscaping, or we have a lot of water truck filling that goes on. And we try to monitor all that, but at least it gives us an idea of you know, whether we're lowering or increasing our water use. And then of course, things like, I know recently a gentleman complained about the fact that he felt that we were cutting the lawns too short. And those are just little things that we need to kind of develop on our own. I wouldn't wait in those instances for Denver Water to come forward and say, hey, we're in a water restriction. Obviously, when they do that, we have to adhere. Sometimes it's voluntary, sometimes it's mandatory, but we do it whether they require it or not. I mean, we're going to do it either way. But the big thing is to, like I said, is to just try and do what we can. And in instances where maybe Denver Water's not saying we need to, but we know we had a really dry spring, and now we're trying to catch up, but doesn't look like we'll totally get there. Those are times when we probably on our own should be proactive and say, okay, you know what, let's think about leaving the grass just a little bit longer so that we don't stress the grass out and burn it out. So and really, I think, you know, you know what all the requirements are for you as far as inspection reporting and everything for Bruce. So I don't think there's really anything else to talk about. Is there any questions specific that either of you guys have? Vince?
With the water usage for construction projects, I noticed that there's a hydrant in the
there is.
recycle yard.
Correct.
That I've noticed contractors using.
Right.
Do we have to, as a contractor, do we got to notify our project manager before we use that water? Yeah,
let them know, because what we're going to try to do is, depending on how much water is used, we may or may not require the use of a meter and then payment for the water. You know, that's the thing we struggle with. Water, we're in a semi-arid climate, but water's not real expensive. But because we're being measured on our water use, if it's excessive, then we need to document it. We still may not charge you for the water. We just want to know how much was used so we can go back and say, okay, we know what we used inside the buildings. This isn't a true reflection of what's used in our irrigation. In fairness, there's also projects that are going on. Water could be used, like urban farmers using water to water around the State Department. You could have dust mitigation where you require water. I mean, there's so many different things that require it. So we just want to be fair so it doesn't look like, hey, we got major problems with our landscaping, what's going on with this. And you know, and Tim, we do things like we don't water during the day typically. We try to water at night or early in the morning so that we don't stress our system out as well. So any other questions that you two guys may have? I mean, a lot of this stuff applies to you guys when it comes to outside the building. So, but you know what? The biggest thing is this, and I always say this to everybody: if you have a question, ask the question. Don't wait until it becomes an issue and then have somebody say, why didn't you ask this question, you know, a while back when we could have answered this and saved you a lot of grief and headache. So again, I'm setting this meeting up with Bob Melvin for Monday to kind of go over the stuff that, because you guys are the ones, and Michael and Bruce are the two CORs, so we can kind of give you guys a little bit of a heads up, and then that allows you to go and have a conversation Monday afternoon with your guys and say, hey, tomorrow, if a gentleman walks up to you and introduces himself as an auditor for the sustainable energy management system for GSA, that you at least know what your role is in this. Because everybody, like I said, even down to the basic laborer, has to know the basic stuff, what happens if. And then, like I said, they don't need to know the whole program, so. Okay.
Hey, question on, today is the first time in a long time I heard that car washing could be allowable.
Well, you know,
Washing is huge for us.
yeah, you know, I think what I would do, Tim, is, you know, we don't have an actual car wash anymore. We used to have one in your building not far from where you're located, and then because of environmental reasons, it was basically done away with. So this is what I would do. I would have that conversation with Bruce, let him know how important it is that you guys have an opportunity to wash your equipment down, and say, you know, since we're going to probably be doing this on a regular basis, how do we go about setting up a procedure and process that works for everybody? And then, you know, and I don't know what that exactly would be, but it may not be much of anything. I mean, they may ask for a small little containment area or something, but we can at least vet that all out and have that discussion. Okay? Hey, guys, thank you.